Long time no speak. This is the inaugural launch of the Monster Update Twitch broadcast. Show you everything you need to know. Thank you for your patience for the extremely long introduction. I apologise, but much better than the last Twitch broadcast, which took 10 minutes of introduction before I started to speak. You may also have noticed that I did a little test half an hour before just to make sure everything works, and this time I actually have a second screen up. You can't see it, but I can see you and your chats. So if you've got any questions, I'm quite happy to answer them. Now, as per usual, a bit rusty on the old Twitch skills. I might be a bit dusty here, so just want to make sure that I am not talking to myself in an empty room and that everyone can hear me. So we'll have a competition who can actually respond first on the chat to say, yes, Lee, we can hear you, you're not talking to yourself. And whilst I'm waiting for that confirmation, I will let the Game Guru's main website scroll from screen to screen to screen. Haha, yes. And we have two winners. We have Gerber70 and Rising TD and JH and Brillidos 3D. So everyone can hear me loud and clear. Wonderful. I must also make an instant protest that in order to be clear vocally, I've had to switch off my air conditioning. So over the next hour, this room is going to go from hot to intolerable. And so I literally am going to switch off this broadcast after 1 hour just to preserve my sanity. So, I'm sure everyone knows what Game Guru is. If you don't know, check out the previous 59 Twitch broadcasts that are readily available from many locations, including our website. And for those that do, you'll all know about the recent update we've done. Well, we've actually done 3. We've done the Monster Update, a Mega Pack 3 update, and the absolutely awesome Enhanced Weapons Pack, which you seriously must check out, and I might even do a little bit of a tour during this hour, just to give you an idea of what it is you might expect to see, and some other features as well, such as the new water slider panel, so you can raise and lower the water, or even go underwater. Although we've not allowed weapons to be shot underwater yet, but we will actually play around with that idea in the future, because it's a really good one. So start obviously queuing up your questions. I'm quite happy to answer your questions before I drone on about the stuff that I want to talk about. I'm going to start off though with our announcement of the Monster Update. I've been sitting on this dragon, not literally, but I have actually been holding on to this dragon for quite some time, probably a year actually, since it was originally commissioned. And then for some reason it really got put off to one side. And then it was remembered to me that, oh yes, we do have this dragon. So I felt it appropriate that we use the dragon and we launch him with this update, whilst we're calling it the Monster Update, because we'll all agree that dragon looks pretty fearsome monster. And he animates lots more animations than is actually in the one I've set up, but I think in the future we can turn him either into a vicious enemy or an ally which can fly around above you and breathe fire on your enemies. We can do all that. Right now, in scripting, it's just for someone like me to sit down and write the script for you, but all the animations are available. Kind of holding off on that because it'd be really cool if we can get the volumetric particle system in there. It's very close, but not quite, and that would allow really nice particle effects, you know, thousands of particle effects on the screen that do a nice alpha test with the depth data, so there's no cutting lines as quads cut through your scene. Everything will look like real smoke from distance to right up close, and fire and smoke and bits and pieces would look much better with the volumetric particle system in place. So I think we'd want to see this dragon come alive with burning fire shooting out its mouth and scorched earth tactics. So something for you to look forward to in the future. But the reason I am glaring at this particular website is it's a nice reminder for me about all the features we've added. So if we look down to here, visual improvements, memory improvements, performance improvements, more lure commands, underwater stuff, an entire new weapon system, well, I'd say an enhanced weapon system, I should say. My favourite, the improved FBX importing, Customizable projectile system. Before this update, it was pretty hard-coded, to the tune that you only had like 3 projectiles that you could choose from: a fireball, a grenade, and a rocket launcher missile. But now we've kind of opened all that up. You can kind of do what you want with that system, add your own stuff, as you'll find out in the enhanced weapons pack, where it's taken to great degree of changing the projectile and then what happens when the grenade explodes. I might be able to show you that demo a little bit later. The enhanced dynamic light system came in pretty quick at the end on the 11th hour, but it got in on time, introducing the long sought after spotlight system and removed the horrendous restriction of only having 3 dynamic lights at any one time. Now you can have as many lights as I think you'd need for a game scene. You can go up to 38 if you wanted to cram that many lights into a small space, but I don't think there's a real limit anymore. You can just use them as you like, and then the shader and the back end takes care of the performance for you, and there's none of this fading out. The fade system still works, but it only happens after you get like 38 lights on the scene. And then of course a big raft of, I've just picked out a few of the fixes and additions just to do a little bullet point list, but you can quadruple that list. It really went on for a very long time. And of course this update really represents one of the first times we've grabbed quite a lot of collaborative effort and put it in an update, and what you see is more contribution than me. So the monster update really demonstrates that it is working, that if we put out the source code into a GitHub style environment, let people chime in, make code contributions, all that kind of thing, and then occasionally incentivize that with some sort of contractual short-term project work with some money behind it, kindly donated by the community, then we can get this engine off the ground a lot quicker and get it developing a lot faster, which I think we'll all agree is a great thing. So that is the monster update. I'm just going to show off the bits that I quite like, and along the way you can sort of see other things as I stray off and go off on a tangent, which I tend to do from time to time. But before that, I just want to pop my head over to the chat session to see if there are any questions. Whilst I've been rabbiting on, I tend not to read and speak at the same time. It confuses my marbles. Ding ding. So, obviously you're watching this video. If you're watching this in YouTube land, you won't see the chat board. I haven't quite figured out how to add the chat to the... I could probably find a way. I mean, Twitch has come on quite a way now. Maybe there's a way to actually have a client window that can show the chat, but for now you're just going to have to hear me read it out. Got a new Twitch user who's seeing me live for the first time. In advance, I apologise. No questions. You're right, the Twitch broadcasts are quite rare now. We used to do them about once a week last year, or early last year. But because we put a lot of our energies just into the development and less around this sort of the marketing and all those kind of bits and bobs, one of the things had to go was the Twitch broadcast. Really like to resurrect them. It's just a question of how much time is available between that and development and all that kind of stuff. The postulation is that there was a Twitch broadcast a week ago. Nope, there wasn't. There might be a test video from half an hour ago, but please don't watch that. It's just 30 minutes of listening to some music and watching a splash screen. So I'm just going to launch straight into Game Guru. I was already playing around with the Enhanced Weapons pack, which is probably a good place to start actually, because I just want to show off one of the features. That was contributed by the community and I dropped it in, and it's the water settings, which I thought was pretty cool. So as you can see, you've got water here. I've been playing around with it. It's not supposed to be that high off the ground, and if I actually lower it a little bit, I can actually go and retrieve the weapon. This is a really cool weapon. You can shoot it as per normal and do your zooming in and stuff, but if you go to full auto, sorry, this one, it really it can send a lot of bullets out. One of my favourite weapons. Lots and lots of weapons in this pack, but I won't dwell on it. You'll probably, everyone who ever had or has Game Guru will be getting this pack. It's absolutely insane. But what I wanted to show is raising the water level, because I can now flood the whole map with water, and I can also go underwater. You've now got an underwater game. You've even got the little ripples going on. Obviously, if you've not got an infinite amount of air in your lungs, you will start to choke on the water. But now you can have a good time. Here we go, starting to gulp. So let's get back out of the water. And as I say, the slider bars, changing the colour of the water, we can change it. Water intensity, transparency, we can make it almost completely clear or completely reflective. You've got water reflection. So obviously we're going to use the colour of the water and none of the sky. But if we pop reflection up, you get all of the sky reflection and none of the watercolours. So you can play around with that. The sparkles you can play with. The direction of the water. The distortions themselves, whether you want them tight in or quite big. The speed of those ripples. The speed of the water. And all of a sudden, obviously you're going to play and tweak this to your game scene. You've now got full control of the water, which is something that people have wanted to see for quite a while. And I had almost nothing to do with it. It was simply dropped into GitHub one day. I had a quick test, made sure it all worked, everything else didn't get broken as a result, and then it went into the software. So expect more of that. I think this is a great way to evolve an engine, having more people involved than just little old me. So that's the water thing, and definitely do check out the DLC, but I want to show you something even cooler. And this is only a personal opinion, because the difference that this update has compared to any other is you can now bring in models from anywhere. It's the FBX importer before was okay. It could do some textures and some. Let me just go into a folder. Here we go, FBX assets. But now, proper FBX importing, it does all kinds of textures. It does static, it does animated models. It won't do everything. FBX is quite a tricky format. There's a lot of variants of it. Stretches back probably a decade, and then every time a new API came out, they farted around with the tokens and the APIs, and old models man at work with new tools, and old tools man at work with new models, and the list will go on. But I found that things like Sketchfab models and models from Unreal and models from some of the asset stores tend to come in pretty cool. And I'm going to show you how to use one now. So I bought a few models because I figured that was the best way, find some really nice models. So I think I'll go with this one, the Ormol. It was like a sort of spider thing. So as you can see, I got the model, I got lots of animations for it, I got all the textures for it as well. So I think I'm going to pick, what shall I pick? An attack. Now I don't know whether that's the actual model or just the animation. So one way you can find out, if I go into open with FBX Review, which you can get from Autodesk, so it is the model and a very uninteresting animation. So that attack obviously isn't. It's either not. It can cry. So it's either the FBX Review that's not doing the animation, or it just didn't have any animation for that file. But taking the animation aside, I can show you the animation in another model soon. What I'm just going to do is just take this model, and it's going to import and convert it. What that means is, not only does it have to import the FBX, it converts it to an FBX format that you can actually use to then convert to a Game Guru entity. And all that's done for you. All you really have to worry about is specifying the textures. Now I'm using a really low resolution here in order to broadcast at a decent bit rate. But on your Game Guru you should get a little bit more space. But you can just about see here at the top the box for specifying the texture. And again, if I just go back to the Ormol character, and this time I pick, there's obviously different sets. I'm going to pick something like set to base color, which has a metallic texture, normal texture, and roughness texture. And then you've actually got, if I can scale it up a bit, you'll actually see your base color that you've just selected for the texture. Now here's your first lesson. I could just, save entity and create an entity and show you that. But there's a better way. I'll show you a better way of doing it. If you actually go, I'll just switch over to, I'm going to choose a slightly larger resolution next time actually. If I go to that same folder, let's pick the textures one. It says base color. If you change the texture name to color or diffuse, and you change the roughness texture to gloss, right? So metallic. Is it metallic or metalness? So we could just quickly check all our other PBR ones. Let's see what we got here. So it's metalness. So that's important too. So once you've actually got your naming conventions sorted out, and I think in the future, I already do support multiple things, like it will check for colour and albedo and diffuse. But there's always another art package, it'll rename it again to base colour or other things. And I will be extending that file system auto detection. But for now, if you just stick to the ones that you find in the default stock art, which is colour, gloss, metalness and normal, and then you go to your importer, just switch down to this again, you'll actually see something slightly different. So I'm going to pick again a model, so I'll just pick the Cry one, and it imports the FBX, and then you can select in the top left corner the texture, and this time we pick colour. Watch what happens, you see. Last time it just gave you the diffuse and it just mapped the model with the diffuse, but this time you've actually got, because it recognised underscore colour, it will assume and look for and find and then add to the normal, the metalness and the gloss, and even an AO, ambient occlusion map, if you've got that as well. And if it doesn't, because it knows it's creating what's called a PBR set, it will create a blank one for you, so you don't have any rogue AO maps in your model. So the only things left to do, if this was an animating one, and I'm pretty sure it is, it's just that the FBX review didn't show it, you'll be able to set the shader to apbr_anim.fx, and I can show that a little bit later with another model. This scale function's pretty horrid. I'll have circulated a design document. I don't know whether it's public yet, but it completely overhauls this importer system. That is, I'm throwing away this importer system and creating a whole new one, which not only lets you specify scales and rotations and inversions of normals and all the rest of it, which is currently exclusive to importing a model. Now you'll actually be able to go into an existing entity and modify all the values and the attributes of that object. So you can take an existing stock, import it, modify it, and then save it as a new entity. Now, it's something you can kind of do now, but you've always got a lot of things that you can't specify. With the new system, you'll be able to do it all, and it's pretty cool, including chaining animations together, which is another feature of the Monster update that I'd like to demonstrate, because that was asked. Can you do a Twitch broadcast to explain the new Append Animation, because it's completely confusing. So now I've scaled it as best I can. I'll scale it a little bit more later. I'll save that entity under, what should we call it? Crab, Lee. I'm literally running out of file names, because as you can see in my users folder, it's gone absolutely crazy. So where's my crab, Lee? Is it that one? Yeah, there it is. I'm going to drop this guy in. He's going to be pretty small, but then I can scale him up. There you go. He is. And that's one of the things as well. You'll notice that as your FBXs come in, there's about 4 different kinds of FBX, which will have a different handiness. So whether they be rotated or upside down, you'll actually find that they come in all shapes and sizes. But I think the reason is that the FBX that I loaded in with the underscore cry, I think that is just an animation file. I know it contains the model data, but it doesn't contain the pose, which comes from the original model before you chain on the FBX animation files. I think that's why it came in at 90 degrees. There's another file in there which would come in the right way up. So if I just select run, just so you can see it, hopefully it's static and it won't just bounce off. So there you go. And if I look at him if we go to F11 and F11 again, and then you can press the numerical keys, you'll see all the different stages. So that's the albedo, the base colour, and then you got the normal. You can see the normals of the model. That's the metalness textures that are applied to it, and the gloss, and then the AO map. There isn't any. then you can just see the ambience, just see the light contributions, and just see the environment contributions. You can even see the shadows as well. So that's a really nice way to analyze your PBR to make sure that you've got consistent PBR rendering across the board for all the models that you import. But what's important is you can now bring in really nice models. And that's a static one. Let's get rid of him. I'll try and show you an animating one. I'll show you how to do that. I'm trying to think which one was animating. Okay. It was the most expensive model I'd actually purchased. It was some big robot. Here we are, the Avalon suit. I paid $30 for it. I can't remember where I bought it from, but here it is. So we can import and convert this. Just reading up on the texture. Sorry, the text chat. Let me just scroll. I think there's quite a lot of questions actually coming in now. Okay. Is the PBR standard set now, or is it likely to change? It is set. You have an albedo, you have normals, metallic, AO, all the standard stuff. So because we've done quite a lot of models now based on that set, it won't even be possible for us to change it because we'd mess everything up that's come up to this point. So the PBR texture set, we may add things. I mean, there's room for things like adding height maps for displacement shading, stuff like that. So we'll be able to, I've got some slots to add some more stuff, but we won't be changing the fundamentals. And for things like inverting the normal map texture, you can actually do that in the FPE file. So I can show you that if there's a question on it. Billy just asks, now that you have all the GitHub support, maybe you could make them a little more frequently. We could really do with some more in-depth explanations on using some of the later additions or features. Yeah, I agree. I think there's quite a lot that we cram into the engine, and that gets very little headlines. We never really go into the juicy details, and a Twitch broadcast would be a great way to deliver that information. But first port of call really is to make sure that documentation's in there in some form, and there is something. If I just jump over to the place I really want to point people at. This resolution's winding me up, but I don't want to increase the resolution just in case you all lose the broadcast. If I go to Wiki and then documentation of Game Guru, I really want this be the ultimate location for all the help that you need. There's quite a bit in here, but I think it can be much, much bigger. So if there is something you really want us to add, a sort of ongoing documentation, and it isn't in this list, or you can't get to it from this list as a starting point, let me know, because this is the first place I'll be putting documentation, and then if that requires deeper explanation, then yeah, it could be the subject of a Twitch broadcast where I can just witter on about it. What is the shortcut to switch modes on guns? It's V. The letter V is the switch mode. The append feature, Retro Game Bloke wants to talk about the append feature. Absolutely, I can get to that. Asked on the forums if you could explain the animation append system. Okay, good. A problem with an FX file, make sure that it's a DirectX 11 shader. It doesn't support the older ones. It's LSL Model 5 now that you've got to support. Don't forget to check out my short GUI on which texture Game Guru uses for S-Little. So Belados has a link. I could share that actually if I cut and paste it into here so you can see what I can see. So this is modeling for Game Guru, texture sets needed for entities. A great little article there. Just kind of go through the fundamentals of the PBR texture set versus the DNSI texture set, which is what we used before. That's a really good place to go. And that's the end of the chat. So without further ado, Lee goes back to his imported model, which has now disappeared. So I'll have to import it again. So as I said, this was an Avalon model. It cost $30, but it came with some really nice textures. In fact, when I saw it, I thought, wow, we can get that into Game Guru, that'd be awesome. And I actually put him in a game, standing inside a big building. So the first thing you do, it's very important, again, I don't really want to spend a lot of energy developing up this importer interface that you're looking at now, because I'm basically binning it and writing a much better one in the future. So I don't really want to dwell on the little tweaks here. But I can show you some of the quirks of it. If you've got a model that you've imported and it's an animating one, then change the APBR to APBR Anim. First thing you do. because that reloads the shader and applies it to the model. The reason you can't see any model is it doesn't really understand its textures. And if it doesn't understand its textures, then the alpha channel of the diffuse will be black, which means it'll be completely transparent, and so it renders as invisible, if that makes any sense. So what you can do when you see all these blank texture slots, that's your opportunity to populate them with the textures that will have come with the FBX model that you've purchased or found. Now again, because of the resolution, the text which is now out of the shot of this screen would tell you when you hover over each texture what it actually is. Because even though the texture isn't found when it loads in the FBX model, it has a material name reference to that texture, which gives you a clue as to which texture is supposed to go there. But because I don't really have that, I'm just going to make some stuff up. So if I just click on that box, and then I go to my place with the Avalon suit and go to the textures, you'll see here I did a little bit of renaming earlier, it seems. Metalness, normal, gloss, colour and AO. As you can see though, with this FBX model there were 4 texture sets. Not just one PBR texture set with one colour and one normal. You actually have head, legs, torso, base. So in order for this to work, it's a multi-textured PBR model, and it can handle all that. That's why you got all those texture slots when you first imported the model. So if I select, I think it might have been head. So we'll just select that. Notice what just happened. You've selected head, and then because it was in the right format, it's now added the PBR set. So it's added, and well, it's found as well, the normal, the metalness, the gloss, and the AO map. Similar with this one. Let's say that was legs. Now, as I say, I can't read the references, so it's going to look a bit jumbly. So if I click colour, it says, oh, colour, and then also you've got the PBR texture sets. So it basically adds those to the list as well. And it loads them all in too. So you can see now that looks like arms, doesn't it? So that's probably supposed to have been arms. And I put legs. So just for fun, we'll just put the torso in here. This is really just to apply all the textures so you can actually see the model. And then I'll put it in the renders so you can actually see it running in test game. The reason for the delay is these are huge textures. These are really high quality textures. What else can we throw in here? I think there was a base one. So we'll use this base texture. We might accidentally get one right. And then this one as well. Maybe use base texture again. As you can see, we're getting quite a lot of textures now for our Avalon robot. I think that last one was the head. But it's all the base textures, all the normals, the metalness, the gloss and the AO map. It looks pretty big. It's like twice the size of a standard soldier character. And we're going to set him up as a static just so we can see it. And so I think that's pretty good. So we can probably save. I'll just click on save entity. And we'll just give it a name. So Lee Avalon Robot. Just so I can sort of find it. And then it started with L. So we have that. There he is. I shall drop him in. So obviously it's loading in the model and all of the things. It looks like that model, the FBX model, it also came with sort of a plinth, probably for presentation. So you'll be able to go into the FPE and designate that limb as deleted. You can actually remove limbs by using the FPE. So just so we don't get too horribly distracted by it, we can just lower him a little touch and then run that, and we'll see if we can see all the different PBR textures. Hello, Mr. Robot. Obviously with the right textures in the right slot it would look 1,000 times better, but you can see you've got all your albedos, your normal maps, metalness, gloss, you've even got some AO maps going on. I think the head's probably using the right one. And because the environment map's working, if we actually set the what we got, world sky to say some sort of orangey glow, you'll actually see that the environment map, I'm going to show it to you. There it is. You got a little bit of reflection of the sky. There's the lighting model and then the old ambience. You can actually knock these up as you need to. But the bottom line is I found an FBX model in an asset store, paid me $30, imported it. It can also import the animations, etc. Whilst we're talking of animations, I think I will show you the append animation before we do run out of time. And for that, the best place to live is in Notepad. Obviously, like I said, with the new imported design, what you'd be able to do is select this, and then there'll be a new item here called Edit Parent. And then that will open up a whole dialogue system which allows you to flick through things like the model, the textures that you can change, the shaders, the animations. You can create and swap animations around. You can set up attributes and collision shapes, all the cool things that you want to do to an entity without having to go back into a notepad or into your modeler, and it'll all be able to be done from within that panel. So it's a really great idea. I'm hoping someone can throw me some feedback so we can get it further along before I start some sort of implementation. So I'll just blank that out, and I'm going to show you the append animation. Now, the creature I'm going to use to demonstrate, because I needed to do it at least once so I knew it all worked, is our dragon. Now, you may not have found this. I've not told anyone where he lives, because I really want to do some more work on him. But I did want to bring him in for the monster update. And so you'll find him under Medieval Dragons. It's not part of the Fantasy Pack DLC. Everyone can have the dragon. You just have to find him. So I'll drop this dragon in, dink, and you'll see him doing his eating rotting corpse animation over and over again. But this is just the one I've set him to play during the editor. He actually has more animations, which I'll show you a little bit later. But whilst he's eating some grass, I just want to go back to the chat to make sure I'm not too far behind. From Billy Dawes, could we get an input field to rotate so that we could type in 90 to rotate in 90 degrees? Yeah, using typing numbers in instead of just using sliders. Absolutely, the new design actually allows for entering numbers instead of... You can still have, like, you know, number tweakers and sliders and stuff like that, but just being able to type out a number sometimes is just the fastest and the only way of doing it. I don't know what this chat's about. If you want to convert over the wiki, you're welcome to do so. Head, shoulders, knees and toes, knees and toes. I think is singing in the chat. Be nice to see how to customize smoke trails such at some point. Nice dragon. Yeah, I can show you that if someone chats me a reminder after I've shown you the append. But before I go into that, I just want to put myself in front of Mr. Dragon. I'm not giving him a name yet. Just call him Mr. Dragon. So what happens is, in the distance, I've got depth of field on pretty intense. In the distance, he just plays his idle animation. As I get closer to him, he gets scared, and then he goes up into the air and he starts flying, and then starts watching me cautiously. But that's all he does. But he has lots more animations, which I'll just show you now. So he's pretty harmless dragon. You know, he doesn't attack you. You don't attack him. He's very strong. You couldn't shoot him. So he's indestructible and he won't attack you. So that's his starting point. But when we finish with him, he'll be able to do all kinds of cool things. If I change his script, because I wanted to show you his animations, I'll show you the end result, you see, before. There we go. What should we use? Yeah. View animation static. Really cool script. You get it with the default Game Guru, and it will allow you to scroll through any entity's animations. So we're currently looking at animation 0, and if I click the left mouse button, we can step through all the animations. You can see it starts off with a walk animation. If I hold down shift, you can just scroll through a lot quicker. So this is 500 frames of idle. So just moping about. I'm also not happy with all the actual animations. As I said, this was sort of put in a drawer and it brought out with whatever animations were done up to that point. But now we can actually see him inside Game Guru. I think we're going to do a lot of really cool animation tweaks, so his foots are always planted. We can do some really cool... there's actually a technique when you move an entity that animates, you can set a special flag where it would actually move in line with the animations. So basically it comes off its center spot, but it converts that moving off the center spot into actual movement through the scene, and it makes perfect foot planting. So maybe that's something I'll do with this guy. So there was the idle. You've got eating something off the floor. Then you've got, oh yeah, that one was sort of turning, so you can actually rotate the dragon and it actually walks around in a sort of a slow circle, rather than him just rotating around, which sometimes doesn't look very good. And then you've got a swipe, so he lunges forward with a swipe. You've got a rear, and then a grab, so he's going to try and bite your head off. And then you've got a breathing fire, so he's going to breathe fire at you. Little sound effect there for you. Oh, and these are 2 hits, so you hit him, he doesn't like, and that's where he actually dies. It's better to probably use a death animation than a ragdoll for this guy, because he's pretty got gangly wings. And that's him launching into the air and flapping. There's also a in there somewhere, there it is, there's a breathing fire animation that can be triggered, and then a land, and then that's it. So that takes you to about 1,300 frames. So those were all the animations, and believe it or not, all those animations are separate FBX files. I only had the model with no animations and lots of these extra FBX files, so it's like, how do I get them all into one entity? Well, I'm going to show you how to do that now. Take as read that it came as an FBX file. I used the importer that you've just seen. It converted it into a regular entity. And then what I did, I used the importer and I imported all the other FBX animations that stored the animation. And those were saved out as .dbo files, which are the model files. And then I can append all those DBO files together to create what you see here. So let's have a closer look at the Dragon's FPE file, which effectively controls the entity and everything about it. So go into Entity Bank, go and find Medieval Dragons. Well, there's only one dragon. And for courtesy, I've also left in the original FBX files and the animation lists, so you can get the exact animation numbers. Why? Because then it would allow you to go through the same process I did and see how it all works. And then once you're comfortable with that, then you can bring in your own models from stuff you've created yourself or stuff that you've bought. And as you can see here in this folder, there is the thumbnail, the FPE, the dragon.dbo, and this is one you should also pay attention to, dragon-final.dbo. And that gets created. You'll notice that 57 meg, whereas the dragon.dbo is only 5 meg. And then you've got the other DBOs that are multiple megs, some bigger than others. The 500 frames of idle animation is 21 meg. So you can imagine that the dragon-final is storing all the animation data in one file, which is great because when you do save standalone executable, that's the only file that you need because it's the model plus all the animations. So how do I make that? Obviously there's no tool to create it. It's actually generated by the engine. It starts off by specifying your animations. So if you scroll down to something that you probably recognize down here, Anim Max, Anim Zero, play animation in the editor, that was the eating the grass animation. But if we go a bit further up, there's a whole new set of fields. You've got Append Anim Max, which specifies how many animations you're going to be tagging, effectively adding together or concatenating. And then a series of entries for each of those 14. So Append Anim 1 and Append Anim Frame 1. So Append Anim 1 is the file name of the animation file that you want to be appending. Now you're thinking, well, what am I appending to? Well, if we scroll to the top, you see model, dragon.dbo, that's your base model. Doesn't have to have animations. It can have animations in there as you want. Super important tip though, make sure that the base model and then all the animation models are all using the same skeleton and the same skeleton structure with the same bone names. Don't change that skeleton as you're changing the animation. If you are changing it, you kind of have to redo it all. But that's really advice from animators and 3D modelers. So start with your base model and then start clicking off all the animation files, Append Anim 1, Append Anim 2, Append Anim 3. The Anim Frame 1 and Frame 2, this is the keyframe where you're going to insert the animation. So it's not just a case of adding them to the end. You can actually chop off the end of a previous animation and insert this animation at that point. It's really useful to get accurate keyframes of when this next animation starts, rather than having to sort of figure out that, add these 7 animations and then figure out how many frames is in each animation file and then add them up. So it's much easier just to see them here, which is why if we look at this 610 to 6763, you'll see that we've got animation sniff at 610 and then the next one starts at 763, so it's really easy to sort of form that. And then of course when you're doing scripting, and yes, I will also show you the script, why not, so you can see how it all glues together. This was the script that controlled what that dragon did, standing on the floor and then taking into the air once you got near it. And as you can see, you're setting up your animation frames for an idle, and this is the animation sequence for taking off. And all of these are described by setting these keyframes up and adding them. And then the last important one is here, Append Animation Final, and that's where you set the file, the name of the file that's going to be created by adding all of these to your base model. And once that's done and it's created, in the future it will only load that file. It will ignore dragon.dbo and all these appends. So potentially if you're selling an entity in the store and you want to hide how you did it, you don't really need all of this stuff. Once you've got that file, you can literally just copy that into here, and so it would just be this single model file with all your animations inside it. Of course you'll remove the clue as to where all the keyframes are. There's no reason why you can't document that in your FPE as well. So that's how it works, and to prove that it works, what I'm going to do quite simply is delete. If we go back to our location for the dragon, medieval dragons. I said dragons, I think I'm going to do some more dragons and pop them in here. I like dragons, what can I say? So dragon-final.dbo, 57 meg. If we delete it, it's going to have to do the animation import again. So if we go back to here and we start a new level, and of course think about it, all that 1200 frames of animation, when I bring it in at this point, it's got a bit of work to do. It has to create all those extra animations. So when you select it, in the background now it's loaded in the base model. Now it's loading in all the individual animations. It's gluing them to the end. It's sorting out the keyframes. It's working out keyframe interpolations between all the frames, doing it all for you, so that when the screen comes back, you'll not only have the dragon with all its animations ready to rock, but it will have created the dragon-final.dbo, which is then the next time you load in the dragon, it loads in a lot quicker because it doesn't have to do all that append step. So that's how you use the append animation system. So if you've got any questions on that, fire them off now and I'm happy to answer. Or I'll move on to how to customize projectiles and show you a little bit about that system as well. Do animations need to be played in the editor before it will play in game? No, there's the play in editor flag in the FPE. So there you go, we've got our dragon. We have all of its animations intact, much as you saw before. If we go into here, you'll see the dragon-final.dbo is back again with a new 1645 date stamp on it, which says we've only got 15 minutes left before I baked like a potato. So there you go. And like I said, the FPE here, play animation edit, you can set that to 0 and it won't play animations. Or you can just get a keyframe of start and end at one frame and then it'll just play the same frame over and over. So that's for that. You can animate static objects now. Yes, oh absolutely. I think if you light mapped it would be properly static. You bake it into the geometry and it does a lot of batching on it and stuff. But in the case of say trees that need to be static for other reasons, then it can actually animate if the animation's in there. So there's no point in, if you wanted a static model that didn't animate, you just wouldn't have any animations in there. So I think that was the logic there. But there are situations you want, for all intents and purposes, an object that doesn't do anything or doesn't have a script, doesn't move, but it might have some kind of animation. Yeah, let them do that. Does each animation need a mesh, or does just the base file need one? I don't think it does. That's a good question too, because people who remember way back in the day, Dirt Basic Pro, which was the very first iteration of what became Game Guru's internal engine, you could have a file that only contained animation data, and it's the exact same mechanism. That DBO file, all it's interested in is grabbing the animation data. It wants to parse that out. It doesn't really need the model. In fact, it ignores the model data when it appends the animation data. So you don't need the geometry. But it's not been tested, so if it goes slightly wrong, then it's a bug. Report it to me, we get it fixed. But no, you don't need that. Because I understand what you mean. If it's a massive geometry and all the textures in there as well, you don't need all that for every appended animation file. So no, the answer is no, you don't need it. Can you show a message saying importing or something similar so you know it's working? Well, you do get that with the model importer. I think you mean when it's generating all the append animations. Well, to the end user who's getting an entity from a store or from us, you'll never see that. It's only when you're creating your own animations. But if that's what you want to see, a little dialogue box, I completely agree. Seeing a black screen for me, it was what, 30 seconds? For you, it might be like 2 minutes if it's a slow machine, and you'd think it's crashed. So, really good suggestion. My suggestion, put it as a request on GitHub Issues Tracker. That's the best way to put something, because that way we can't ignore it. I'll always remember it because it's there in digital form, and what's even better, somebody else might read it who's got access to the repository and then do the fix for you. So that's the best place to put it. Stick it on the Issues Tracker. So reading through the chat, it's getting lively now. Can you test that theory please, lol? I've reported it on GitHub twice now. If you change play animation 1 to 0, it will still work in the test game. Yeah, well, it will. The play animation in editor only plays it in the editor. It will completely ignore this flag in your test game. At that point, it would observe whatever animation's been configured. If you set Animax to 0 and then wipe these out, then it shouldn't play in an animation. But the play animation anim in editor is only really playing it in the editor. So correct me if I misunderstood the request from the chat. Grenada 21 asks, can we have grenades not explode as soon as they hit the water? Never really handled grenades personally, so I have no idea what they do if you throw them in the water. I imagine most of them would just fizzle out because you've got them wet. Maybe the grenades that are waterproof so they can do a concussive charge underwater. Water's a kind of a relatively new thing for us. There's lots of things I'd like to do, like when barrels drop into the water, they should splash, and when you streak a melee weapon through the water, it should create sort of a ripple effect as it slides through the water. And having water interact differently on the shores and the edges where they meet the land and other objects. Lots of things I'd like to do, including the interactions of weapons and objects and brass effects in the water as well. So yeah. The behaviour of grenades in and around water, I think, should be looked at. But as I say, if you can put it in as a GitHub, either a request, or you feel so strongly that it's a bug, then put it down as a bug, and then we can get it all sorted. Can you set player editing 0 and so the animation not running in the editor? Literally, yeah, that's probably the wisest course of action. So we'll set that to 0. Save the FPE file. Leave the editor. Rerun the editor, and now because our FPE Dragon play anim in editor is set to 0, this entity shouldn't play an animation in editor. Not sure why you wouldn't want your animating object to animate in the editor. Maybe it's something about setting a pose so you can position it perfectly. So maybe that's a good reason for doing it. But if it is a bug, this animation should be seen. Are you a bug? In which case it can be added to the issues tracker. Nope, it's basically static. So that flag's doing its job. So you don't need to put it in issues tracker. We've already got 133 to worry about. So no more questions for the moment. So I'm going to move on to the particle effects. We've got less than 10 minutes left, but I think we've got enough time to show you that. A little tour into the files folder. Scroll down to Game Core. Projectile types. Ignore all this out here. This is just legacy stuff. These are also, because they lack shortcuts, in some old stuff, some old weapons and things, it was just called hand grenade, RPG grenade and fireball, and we had to maintain that compatibility. But it now creates the full link. Hand grenade is now in modern, RPG grenade is now in modern, but fireball is in fantasy. So it's giving that information. So that's what all that is for. So this is where you'll actually place your own custom stuff. Now, fantasy, fireballs, if you can leave modern and fantasy alone, these are our own internal stock folders, but enhanced was one that Errant AI created, because he collaborated to create some really awesome weapons, and he also wanted to have his own customized grenade. So he created his own folder for his pack, and within that folder he actually has the M67, which is the grenade that you'd use. And we'll just go into the new bits. Obviously, you know, it's much like you saw it before in previous updates. The really cool stuff happens towards the bottom. So here we've got type of particles. So particle of 99, so you set code 99, then it overrides the standard stock ones. So there's either no particles coming off the projectile when it moves through the game, or there's some smoke, or there's some flares, or there's some fire. So those are the built-in ones. But let's say you didn't want any of those, you wanted your own, just set that value to 99 and provide a decal. That's C.DDS, if you look at it here. It's a grid of 8 by 8, and it plays them in sequence to create an animation, and then it seamlessly loops. So that's what you provide. You provide it with a DDS file, and then it will use that instead of the stock ones. The type of the explosion that triggers, again, you can just use the standard explosion, there's only one. Or you can set it to 99, and then you can give yourself, there's two images. You'd have the explosion itself, again an animating 8 by 8 grid, and also optionally some smoke, which is also an animation that can play at the same time as the explosion. And then you've got some flags as to whether it actually produces a light effect. And also, this is kind of hard-coded, but when we actually add more particle stuffs, you'll be able to customize this as well, which is some little sparkly orange-red things that fly away really quickly and then dissipate. You can decide how many of those to have, if you want any at all. This one at the bottom, that's probably the coolest flags, but because of the time that we've got left, I'm going to preserve that for another Twitch broadcast. Suffice to say, it allows you to trigger events in your script and the conclusion of a particle, a flurry, a projectile that you send off with the weapon that you create. So that's how you do all that, which I think is pretty awesome. And just to confirm, you've got your animations for your explosion, and then the B is the smoke, so you can see all those. You've got sound effects, which are specified in the text file, obviously the model, and then the DNS. In the future update, you'll be able to have a PBR texture set here. But because they basically fly out of your hand or from a rocket launcher so quick, no one really notices that it hasn't got that subtlety and stuff that you usually need when you're staring at something for a very long time. Okay, so just going through the chat, see if there's anything new popping up. Sheesh, my issue was if play animation was 0, it didn't play in the test game. No, it's just the editor. That flag is really just for the editor. But like I said, if it is a persistent issue, and it definitely is a bug, and it's something happening in test game that I'm not appreciating, just stick it in as an issues tracker. I'll be able to track that for you and get it sorted. So that's the projectile system. I'm just going to bounce back to my yeah, not that one, it was the other one, wasn't it? We've been busy on the website. Back, and gone. Oh yeah, it was here. Okay, so visual improvements. As you see, we've gone to town really to make PBR even better. The shadows are higher quality. Memory, that was a really big issue where we've now, it was the almighty Preben who went through and he monitored every single byte that the engine was using and managed to cut it back quite a lot. So now you've got a lot more memory stability, including a really cool thing which can free up a lot of memory between levels of your standalone game. So now you can have many successive levels in your standalone executable. Performance improvements, that's a given. I mean, if you compare this towards the one we did in April, it's rocketing now, so a lot of more people are happier with the speed of things. We'll always optimize, there'll always be more performance improvements along the way, but I'm really happy that we actually got a new, faster clock time for our games. Underwater antics, that's what you saw at the beginning, where you can raise the water level and now you're wobbling underneath, or you can dive into water and you can move around at a slower speed and eventually choke. What we're going to do next, I think, is we're going to have it so certain weapons can operate underwater. So things like the the gloved hands, and then the knife and other melee weapons. I mean, there's no reason why I can't use those underwater. And then of course you need some enemies underwater, so you see how that sort of story will unfold. The weapon system is really about you can check them out with the enhanced weapons pack. You've seen the improved customized projectile system I showed you, the enhanced light system. I think I've got a couple of seconds to show you that one. If Game Guru is still running. Okay. Should we use dragon or should we just use a big wall? Yeah, let's use a wall. So do we have a wall? Yes, there you go. So we've got a wall. And this, get rid of him. We've got markers. As you know, you've got your start marker. But if you keep scrolling down now, you've got some new things. You've got the image zone, which when you go into the zone, it'll play an image for you. You've got text zone. When you go into that text zone, it'll display some text on the screen. And ambient zone is when you go into that zone, it will play some music. And when you leave the zone, the music's still playing. So you can use it to change the music very simply from section to section within your game. But if you keep going even further, you've now got spotlights. So you've got spotlight with a proper icon. You see, we've got a white one, you can have a red one, green one. We can zoom in a little bit closer. You see they're actually shaped. So you've got a conical direction there, so you can change the rotation. So you can face it to the floor and rotate it over to that one. You can rotate yourself this way, and you can mix up some lights. You can move it so you've got the intensity going on. So there you go. And there you go. The only downside with spotlights, it's only right I should show you, is they don't cast shadows. So as you can see, the little red and the green is actually coming through on that other wall, like so. Because they're just like spotlights. You drop in a spotlight, dink. Sorry, that was I meant a point light, dink. It lights in every direction. You know, it doesn't cast a shadow, so that light is being picked up on an object even behind that. The next thing, and it really can impact for performance, which is why we're being very careful about it, is for dynamic lights to cast their own shadows, and so the light never gets to an object hiding behind another object. But for situations where, say, this is your game and you're walking along an alley or something, you can actually have a spotlight that's featuring a particular area and rotating or doing what it needs to do to sort of accentuate the aspects of your game. And as I said, you can now have lots of lights. You're no longer limited to spreading them out. I mean, you could have lots of lights before, but you couldn't really put them side by side beyond 3. Now you can just have as many as you like, and the engine can cope with it. So that was the enhanced light system, which applies to all the objects, not just the floor, but also entities and characters and anything else that's using the common shader. So I won't go through all the nitty gritty, except to say that is a very brief and callous oversight of the Monster update. Lots of other features in there if you care to look through the GitHub for the change log, and I think we released a great big list somewhere on the forums that you can pour through if you like. I'm going to check one last blast at the chat board to see if there's any more questions. Astropine341 is hyped about getting shadows with the dynamic light system. I think everyone would love to see that. I just have to be really stressful about well, paranoid is probably the right word, about the performance impact of having multiple shadows in your game. It's always going to look good, and modern graphics cards can handle that sort of thing, but we've still got people who use Windows 7 on integrated graphics, and you slow down the experience for them and they won't thank you at all for that. It might be something that can switch on and off, and switch it off completely for the lower end specifications. But yeah, it's definitely on the cards, and it's the natural next step for the dynamic light system. So I think that's it. No more questions for me, which is great. It means I'm almost on the hour. And obviously my intro was 2 minutes long, so I can actually talk for another minute guilt-free. That was the Monster update for Game Guru. I'm going to be on holiday for a couple of weeks, so you won't hear anything from me. I usually frequent the Steam discussion boards and Steam reviews and Facebook and YouTube and the forums, and of course our own support mail system. And I do respond Monday to Friday every day, but when I'm on holiday I'm going to leave all the computers in the UK. I'm not taking anything electrical apart from a mobile phone, and I'm banning myself from checking the emails. So that's my well-earned break. When I get back, I will be taking a fresh look at the GitHub issues tracker and looking at what is the next big thing for the update. Is it going to be all about bug fixes? Are we going to bring in some really cool new features? I suspect I will be responding to what you've felt about this monster update and anything that is almost there but not quite. So those sorts of things get into the update. But as I say, and what's always been the case with Game Guru, it's very much a community-driven, community-led, community-inspired endeavour. So, you know, I have my ideas, but there's more of you than there are of me. So if you've got any suggestions and you can club together and you all agree on one thing and say, you have to do this for the next update, then it gets done and it gets put into the engine. But I hope you enjoyed the monster update. We've got another update to the Fantasy Pack DLC, I think it's next week, where we're actually putting magic staffs in the hands of you. So, you know, you've got your magic staff and your fireball staff. And on the Fantasy Pack, you've got the ice staff and then the poison staff. Well, before it was just a hand on the screen. Now you can actually see the staff being held. So that's what's coming. Little sneak preview for those that tuned into the Twitch broadcast. So until next time, and I hope it won't be too long until the next time, I'll wish you well and happy game making. And as per usual, you can find me on the usual social feeds till about the middle of next week, when I'll promptly disappear in a puff of smoke. So until then, I shall say goodbye and thanks for your attention. Goodbye.